I first started getting alopecia areata when I was really young, primary school age. We were living in Guam at the time. Actually, it may have started even earlier than that. My parents told me doctors had noticed it when I was still a baby. I had pretty severe asthma as a kid and spent a lot of time dealing with inflammation and treatments. Somewhere along the way, alopecia became part of the conversation. The funny thing is, I don't remember any of that. My first real memory is just hearing that I had a bald spot on the back of my head. I didn't find it myself. My parents were the ones who noticed it and started asking questions. Back then, there wasn't much information available, no Google, no YouTube, and no online communities sharing their experiences. There was really just a doctor telling my parents that I had alopecia areata. After that, everyone was left trying to make sense of it. One thing I remember hearing over and over was my dad's theory about steroids. Because of my asthma treatments, he always wondered if they had something to do with the hair loss. Looking back now, it's kind of ironic. Steroids are actually used to reduce inflammation, which is part of what causes alopecia areata in the first place. But that's what parents do. They try to connect the dots and find a reason why something happened to their child. The funny part is that while everyone else was worried about it, I wasn't. I honestly didn't care very much. I wasn't scared. I wasn't embarrassed. If anything, I thought I had gotten a pretty good deal. The school gave me permission to wear a hat whenever I wanted. For a kid, that felt like winning the lottery. Most students had rules. I had an exception, so I wore that hat all the time. When I think back on those years, I don't remember worrying about my hair. I remember being a kid. I remember recess, making friends, and running around after school. Alopecia was just kind of there in the background. That's something I've come to appreciate as I've gotten older. Kids often aren't thinking about hair loss the same way adults do. They're thinking about cartoons, playgrounds, and what they're doing after school. At least that's how it was for me. There was one person who seemed much more concerned about it than I was, my older brother. He was about 6 grades ahead of me and noticed things that completely went over my head. He saw comments and reactions that I never paid attention to. He would tell me later that kids sometimes made comments about my hair. The difference was that he noticed them and I didn't. If someone said something, it bothered him far more than it ever bothered me. He always felt like he needed to protect me. A few times, he even got into fights because he was defending me. Looking back, that's probably the most upset anyone ever got about my alopecia. The funny thing is that I wasn't the one throwing punches. I was usually off somewhere playing with friends, completely unaware of what was happening. That's one of my strongest memories from that time. Not the bald spot, not the hat, but knowing I had a big brother who always had my back. As I got older, the bald spot eventually disappeared. Little by little, the hair grew back until it was completely gone. After a while, alopecia stopped being something I thought about at all. Life just moved on. We moved from Guam to Hawaii, and by the time I was in elementary school, it felt like the whole thing was behind me. For years, my hair was completely normal. No bald spots, no hats, and no doctor's appointments. If you had asked me back then about alopecia areata, I probably would have said it was something I used to have when I was little. I had no idea it would come back later in life. When I was a kid, alopecia felt like a temporary thing. It showed up, disappeared, and life moved on. For most of my childhood, I honestly believed that chapter of my life was over. As the years passed, I stopped thinking about bald spots altogether. Alopecia became more of a family story than a personal reality. By the time I reached high school, I had a full head of hair and no reason to believe anything was about to change. Then one day, completely out of nowhere, alopecia areata came back. And this time, it felt very different. I was in high school when it came back. I don't remember the exact day, but I remember the feeling immediately. This time, I was old enough to understand that something wasn't right. I knew exactly what I was looking at. When you're a little kid, you don't spend much time worrying about how you look. High school is different. Suddenly, appearance matters, confidence matters, and whether we like it or not, hair becomes part of how we see ourselves. For the first time, alopecia wasn't just something happening to me, it was something I was emotionally reacting to. I started checking mirrors constantly. Every morning became a search for new spots or signs that it was getting worse. The uncertainty was probably the hardest part. I never knew if the patch would stay small or keep spreading. Back then, there wasn't much information available. This was before YouTube, before social media, and before online support groups. Most of what I knew came from old memories, a few doctor visits, and whatever information my family could find. For the first time in my life, alopecia felt less like a childhood inconvenience and more like something I might have to live with long term. I started finding little ways to hide it, adjusting my hair, changing how I stood, always wondering if people could see the spot. Most people probably weren't paying nearly as much attention as I thought they were, but that's not how it felt at the time. Once I became aware of it, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Alopecia was taking up far more space in my mind than it was on my head. Looking back, I think a lot of that came from uncertainty. I didn't know what was going to happen next. Would the hair grow back like it did when I was a kid? Or was this the beginning of something completely different? By the end of high school, I still didn't have answers. What I had was a lot of questions and a lot of uncertainty. I kept hoping it would follow the same pattern as before, show up for a while, then quietly disappear. Part of me believed that if I just waited long enough, one morning I'd wake up and everything would be back to normal. And eventually, that's exactly what happened. The hair grew back, the spot disappeared, and life moved forward again. At the time, I thought that was the end of the story. I had no idea alopecia would return later in life and become a much bigger part of my journey. College came and went, and for a while, alopecia faded into the background again. I stopped thinking about it every day. The hair had returned, life felt normal, and I assumed the worst was behind me. For years, I treated alopecia like an old chapter of my life, something that happened when I was younger. But alopecia has a way of reminding you that it's still there, even when you think you've moved on. As I entered adulthood and started building my career, the story wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. I started my career and focused on building a life. Work, relationships, and everyday responsibilities slowly took center stage. For a while, alopecia faded into the background. It wasn't gone, but it wasn't something I thought about every day. Then it came back again, not as a childhood memory or a high school problem, but as something I was now dealing with as an adult. That's when I began exploring treatments, meeting with dermatologists, and searching for answers that simply weren't available when I was younger. What followed was a long journey of trial and error, setbacks, unexpected lessons, and eventually hope. But that's a story for the next video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate it if you would like, comment, and subscribe. And if you've dealt with alopecia yourself, feel free to share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.